Chapter 39. When we sold the back property on August 28, 1958, I thought of my father, who bought acreage and let it sit for 20 years appreciating. But here, to my grief, the developer set to work immediately. He cleared the 3 acres east of us right down to the last dandelion, demolished the old buildings, and polluted the air for days with burning trash. We often watched the commotion while sitting in the breakfast nook. It overlooked the spot where, during his first visit, Grandpa Gustafsson had claimed we could grow enough food to feed all the starving children in the world. That spring, he insisted Corey hire a team of horses to plow up a large garden space, leaving only a small area for a play yard. That area, because of its proximity to several other backyards, had been the gathering place for the neighborhood children. The center of activity had been the old apple tree. Its low, widespread branches made it a perfect tree to climb. Corey had added knotted ropes and tire swings, and nearby, a seesaw. During a snowy winter, even a little ski jump. For some sentimental reason, I had believed that no one could fail to see the great value in the old tree. Certainly, though everything else was expendable, the ancient tree would stand. But on that day, when we heard the wretched noise of the chainsaw, we watched in disbelief as one by one the branches of the old apple tree fell, and finally the chainsaw was directed right into the heart of the tree. It was as if someone had taken a dagger to our own hearts. In the place where there had been the happy voices of children came the apartments. "They look like remnants from the Vanport flood," I complained. Corey confirmed my opinion. "Yeah, I've never seen such shoddy construction." Among their bad features was the lack of setback that was the norm for the houses on our street. The apartments were being built right out to the sidewalk. Everything about the project repelled us. The noise was constant. Workers with little awareness of property rights began using the faucet under our bathroom window to drink, fill buckets, or clean paintbrushes. Freya and I felt violated, imagining peeping toms staring at us. Eric said the peeping toms were watching him pee. Sig said they were making him constipated. I hung heavy curtains, which stopped the prying eyes but also kept out the morning sun. As the apartments began filling up, strangers began using our yard as a back alley. To add to our pain, our home life was becoming fragmented. After graduating from Cleveland High School in June 1960, Freya began working full-time at the Downtown Bank of California. In her spare time, she was dating. Sig was vending for long hours at the baseball games in the Civic Stadium. Olav, who had finally obtained a permit to work on Corey's jobs, had gone back to Canada to paint bridges. That left Eric to find companions on his own. His old friend Rusty came over through the backyard, and they played around the construction site with older boys who lived down the street. Wild boys, according to the neighbors. Boys who had little discipline at home and were free to wander at will. I was uneasy, but at least he was occupied. Earlier that year, the Winter Olympics, the big event of the skiing world, had arrived. Corey and Olav went to Squaw Valley weeks early to work on the jumping hill. For Sig's vacation, Corey sent him a ticket to fly down. Eric felt slighted. He became rebellious. I was in a dilemma. I knew that if I let him out of my sight, he would be gone. I began having to track him, asking neighbors along the way if they had seen him. I was frightened. Eric's life had been a special gift. His conception, when I was sure I wouldn't have any more children, had come soon after I had been converted to Christ. When both Freya and Sigurd were born, I had looked upon motherhood as my right as a woman. But after I had become aware of God's presence in my life, I had started to view everything as a gift from Him. Other complications arose. Mama had been in and out of the hospital several times. Dor had moved back to Seattle to be near her. I wanted to go to Seattle too, but I didn't dare leave home. All I could do for Mama was pray. And I didn't even have a pray meeting to attend. When we were on the farm, the kids had always had easy access to their dad. That was where he worked on his equipment, loaded the truck, met with his workmen, and did his office work. But now it seemed that Corey was seldom around. The Olympics had taken much of his time. When he returned, there was no letdown. He arranged for all the Japanese ski jumpers who had dominated the games to participate in a special tournament on the Cascade Jumping Hill. He also played a key role in establishing a jumping hill in the baseball stadium in Portland and invited jumpers from the United States, Canada, and Norway. By the time the ski season finally wound down, Corey was beginning to feel spread thin. Perhaps after all the pomp and circumstance, he was deflated. It could be a midlife crisis. After all, he had just turned 54. Or maybe he just longed for a view, just like Norway. Whatever the case, he started looking at house plans. We considered the effects that a new house in the valley might have on our family. Being on the site of his warehouse would save Corey significant travel time. It could be beneficial for Eric to separate from his questionable friends. However, for Freya and Sig, their jobs would present a transportation challenge. We reviewed our finances. We can sell the beach cabin. This wasn't as painful as it might seem. We had never used it as much as I had envisioned. Not like how my family used our cabins in the Washington Mountains and on Vashon Island. One reason was that not long after we had built it, we started attending church, which shortened our weekends. In winter, it was ski season, and in summer, Corey was so preoccupied with his business that he could never take a vacation. It reached a point where the kids and I would often go to the cabin without him, and I started renting it to friends on weekends. After Olav became so enthusiastic about the cabin, we spent much of that summer there. He loved fishing off the rocks, or crabbing in Nedart's Bay, or salmon fishing at Garibaldi. When he wasn't fishing, he was installing the paneling. As Freya and Sig grew older, they started going with friends independently. Once, a neighbor called to tell me that they had left the front door wide open, and a storm was blowing into the entry. We hastily made the trip down to clean up. It was time to sell. Then I received an inheritance from Ori Bigham, my father's sister. I knew that the Bigham family had always put great faith in real estate. We contacted Daryl Meng, Happy Valley's go-to backhoe operator, to start excavating for a house in the valley. Once we had marked out the foundation, Arlo visited us on his tractor. "Too bad you have to have such a close neighbor," he remarked, eyeing the Biastocks ranch-style house. Corey replied, "Yes, 12 acres to build on, and they have to construct practically on the property line. I don't understand." Arlo said, "You mean you haven't figured it out? They bought their 12 acres planning to start their house, and then they'd buy this place and the pasture below, which was for sale at the time. Then they'd demolish the barn, and their mansion would sit elegantly in the center of their property. Unfortunately, I think they ran out of money." Corey and I stared at him. It was so obvious. When we poured the foundation, Olav had returned from a summer of working on bridges and was able to help. But soon, he bid us a final goodbye and returned to Norway. In his first letter, he mentioned that he was building his own house on his hillside farm. We had intended to stay in town until our house in the valley was habitable, which we estimated would take about 6 months. One day, however, I found Eric far away near the swimming pool at Reed College. I was absolutely panicked. When I told Corey, his response surprised me. I had never thought of him as a particularly devoted family man. I even wondered if, except for his willingness to agree with me, he would have preferred to remain childless. But his commitment was clear now. He gave notice on the little brown house. "We'll live there again until we can finish the new house." Soon we hired another moving van and directed the driver to head east. "It's in Happy Valley." "Where the hell is Happy Valley?" We all answered in unison, just a few miles west of Boring. However, our lives were far from boring. Disaster, disruption, heartache. Choose one or choose all.